I've been a nurse for 6 years, long enough to know that hospitals become very different places after midnight. During the day, they feel busy and alive, full of doctors rushing through hallways, nurses talking quietly at the station, and the constant rhythm of machines and monitors. But at night, everything changes. The lights become dimmer, the hallways grow quieter, and even the smallest sound seems strange. In 6 years, I have seen death, pain, and things that would break most people. I've watched patients take their final breaths and comforted families who didn't know how to say goodbye. Because of that, I always believed nothing in a hospital could scare me anymore. But that belief ended the night I was assigned to the 3rd floor of St. Jude's Hospital. St. Jude's is an old building sitting at the edge of town, surrounded by tall pine trees and a nearly empty parking lot. During the day, it looks like any other hospital, busy and normal. But there is something about the building at night that feels wrong, especially the 3rd floor. 3 months ago, the hospital shut most of that floor down because of budget cuts. There were too many empty rooms and not enough staff to maintain them, so the remaining patients were moved to the lower floors. Since then, the 3rd floor has stayed mostly dark and abandoned. The lights are dim, the rooms are empty, and the air always feels colder than the rest of the hospital. Most nurses avoid going up there whenever they can. They never say exactly why, but everyone knows there are stories about that floor. Some say they hear call buttons ringing in empty rooms. Others say monitors turn on by themselves. Administration always blames old wiring or electrical problems, but the staff quietly share different explanations. That night, around 2:13 a.m., the charge nurse approached me at the station on the 2nd floor. Night shifts are usually slow at that hour, with most patients asleep and the hallways nearly silent. She told me there was a staff shortage and asked if I could go up to the 3rd floor to check the monitoring system. It was supposed to be a quick job that would take only a few minutes. I didn't like the idea, but refusing wasn't really an option. I grabbed a flashlight and took the elevator up. The moment the elevator doors opened, I felt the temperature change. The air on the 3rd floor was cold, much colder than the rest of the hospital. The hallway lights were dimmed to emergency mode, casting long shadows across the empty corridor. Many of the room windows were covered in plastic sheets, and the air smelled strange, like old medicine mixed with dust and something faintly rotten. I walked slowly to the abandoned nurses' station, where several old security monitors were still running. The grainy black and white screens showed empty patient rooms. Room 312 was empty, just a bed and a monitor collecting dust. Room 314 looked the same. Room 315 showed nothing but darkness. Everything seemed completely normal, and for a moment I started to relax. Then I heard it. A soft chime echoed through the hallway. Every nurse knows that sound immediately. It was a call button, the kind patients press when they need help. I looked up at the monitors and saw a small red light blinking beside one of the screens. The signal was coming from room 309. My stomach tightened instantly. That didn't make sense because room 309 had been locked and unused for years. When I checked the monitor connected to that room, the screen wasn't showing a camera feed. It was just static, white noise flickering across the display. The call button chimed again, and the red light kept blinking. I tried telling myself it was probably a wiring problem, like the administration always claimed. Still, something felt wrong. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the hallway. My footsteps echoed softly against the tile floor as I walked toward the dark end of the corridor. The silence was so deep, it almost made my ears ring. Room numbers slowly passed by on the wall as I moved forward. 305, 307. And then, just before I reached 309, I heard another sound. It was slow and heavy. Drag. Pause. Drag. It sounded like something being pulled across the floor somewhere ahead of me. I froze in place, holding the flashlight tightly. The sound stopped immediately, leaving the hallway silent again. After a moment, I forced myself to keep walking until I finally stood in front of room 309. The door looked old and neglected. The paint was chipped, and the metal handle was slightly rusted. A faded maintenance sign still hung beside it, warning that the room was closed. But the small call button panel beside the door was glowing red, blinking steadily, as if someone inside had pressed it. I leaned closer to the door, and that's when I heard breathing on the other side. It was faint, but unmistakable. Slow, wet breaths, like someone struggling to breathe. My chest tightened as I knocked gently on the door. "Hello?" called. "Is someone in there?" For several seconds, there was no answer. The breathing stopped completely. The hallway felt colder, almost freezing. I slowly reached for the door handle and felt the metal against my hand. It was unbelievably cold, like touching ice. Every instinct in my body told me to walk away. But ignoring a call button goes against everything nurses are trained to do. So I knocked again. "Is someone in there?" For a moment, there was only silence. Then a voice answered from inside the room. It was soft, raspy, and sounded strangely distorted, as if the speaker were underwater. "Nurse." The single word made my blood run cold. I stepped back slightly from the door. "Who's in there?" I asked. The voice spoke again in the same weak whisper. "It's time. For my medicine." Suddenly, the dragging sound started again from inside the room, getting closer to the door with each movement. The breathing returned too, louder and more uneven now. My flashlight flickered slightly as the hallway lights dimmed. Then the call button chimed again from the other side of the door, right in front of me. Before I could react, the door handle slowly began to turn. I stared at it in disbelief. The room had been sealed for years, but the handle kept moving as if someone inside was unlocking it. With a long creaking sound, the door opened just a few inches. A rush of icy air poured out of the dark room, carrying a powerful smell of rot and decay. I raised my flashlight and aimed the beam inside. At first, I saw only shadows and dust-covered equipment. An old hospital bed sat against the wall. Peeling paint hung from the ceiling. Then the flashlight beam moved slightly to the side and illuminated something standing beside the bed. The figure was tall and impossibly thin, its skin gray and stretched tightly over bone. A torn hospital gown hung loosely from its body. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle, and its eyes were completely black. The thing slowly turned toward me, staring directly into my face. Its mouth opened slowly, revealing crooked yellow teeth. In that same wet whisper, it spoke again. "Nurse, I've been waiting a very long time." Every instinct in my body finally reacted at once. I turned and ran down the hallway as fast as I could. The lights above flickered violently as I sprinted toward the elevator. Behind me, I heard the dragging footsteps again, moving faster and closer with every second. At the same time, call button alarms started ringing throughout the entire floor. Every empty room began chiming at once, as if dozens of invisible patients were calling for help. I reached the elevator and pressed the button repeatedly, my heart pounding. The dragging sound suddenly stopped somewhere behind me. Slowly, I turned my head and looked down the hallway. At the far end of the corridor, the figure stood in the darkness watching me. Its head twisted slowly to one side, and then it smiled. The elevator doors finally opened, and I jumped inside, hitting the first floor button immediately. Just before the doors closed completely, I saw the figure begin moving toward me far faster than something dragging its legs should have been able to move. When the elevator reached the first floor, I stumbled out into the brightly lit lobby. Other nurses looked at me in confusion, asking what had happened. I could barely speak. Security checked the third floor later that night, but found nothing unusual. Room 309 was still locked exactly the way it had been for years, with no sign that anyone had been inside. Later that shift, one of the older nurses quietly pulled me aside. When I told her what room I had visited, the color drained from her face. She told me that years ago a patient had died in that room after repeatedly pressing the call button during the night. The nurse assigned to him never came, and the man died alone, still waiting for his medicine. Since then, people working the night shift sometimes hear the same call button chime coming from the abandoned third floor.